Bom dia, é um prazer estar com vocês. Hoje eu trouxe uma pessoa muito especial, um grande amigo, Gareth Forber. Gareth Forber digamos, uma das pessoas que mais dominam a questão do mercado de soft commodities e açúcar em especial, desde a época da LMC, agora, vamos dizer assim, como Global Data. Okay, Gareth, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Nice. It's a pleasure to be with you. We have some questions about the market that I believe that everybody wants to know. The first one is that Global Data has been analyzed the logic of the global sugar market, and it's clear that consumption in the West has been falling slightly, while consumption in Africa, Asia, growing. Mm-hmm. Will the additional demand around 2 million tons of sugar per year remain the same, or can changes be expected?
Well, it's a good question. I think the short answer to your question is I think that 2 million tons of growth per year is a good ballpark estimate of what we might expect. Why do I think that? Is because 2 million tons is roughly 1% per year. That's been the average annual growth rate over the last 10 years or so. And it's quite similar to global population growth. So if you look at global population, it's growing slightly more than 1%. So that's helping to underpin consumption growth. In terms of per capita consumption, you're seeing different trends. As you mentioned, we've got per capita consumption in Europe and the Americas, which is high but falling. And you've got per capita consumption in Asia and Africa, which is relatively low but growing. But the key point, I think, is that the population growth in the world is concentrated in parts of the world where sugar consumption is below average. So that's helping to underpin growth, despite the fact that we have all these headwinds against sugar because of its the link with obesity and the challenge, the health challenges that the world is trying to face. I think over the last 10 years we've had challenges from sugar taxes that have been applied in lots of countries, and that's had an effect on demand for sugar in soft drinks. That trend will probably continue, but I think there's a new one that we should look out for, which is the potential impact from the use of GLP-1 drugs for weight loss. So just to explain a little bit, GLP-1 drugs are things like Ozempic and Wegovy.
Yeah.
And they're...
Sorry, I love Ozempic.
Oh, really?
Really?
Well, this could be an issue for sugar in that case, because taking Ozempic can reduce your craving for appetite for both sugar and fats. And at the moment, those drugs are relatively expensive, but over time, those costs will come down as generic versions of these drugs become available. And so if we're thinking about over the next 5 to 10 years, it could be if those products or those drugs start to be used more widely, then that could add to the challenges that sugar consumption faces.
Nice, very, very interesting. The truth is that we begin to talk about demand because, as you know, we have clear concerns about the physical limits of the agriculture expansion in different countries. In Brazil, there's a large contingent of land with some type of degradation, mainly pastures, with around 40 million hectares to be recovered. It's 40 million.
It's huge.
With different agricultural crops. This is not the case in developed countries, logically, or even in other areas of the planet. Sugarcane and sugar beet are the heart of the sugar supply, while cereals, mainly corn, are expanding their use for ethanol production and protein-rich byproducts such as animal feed. And this is a kind of phenomenon that is expanding in Brazil very, very fast. We would like to hear from you about the India factor, Gareth, with ethanol. Will others follow this path in the tropical zone of the planet? That's number one. If other countries will go in the same route that India is going. And number two is, will corn be increasingly integrated with sugar crops in flexible industrial plants, as we are seeing here?
Yeah, there's important issues going forward. I think in terms of whether others will follow the sort of Brazil example in terms of ethanol, like India has. There are countries that are looking to do that, like Indonesia, for example, wants to develop an ethanol program. But it's unlikely to be cane-based because Indonesia is a big deficit market for sugar, so it makes it more difficult. It's more likely to be based from palm oil in terms of producing biodiesel, these sorts of crops. I think that there are other examples, like obviously Thailand has an ethanol program, but that's more based on molasses and cassava rather than cane. So I'm not sure there's a clear example of a country, the next country that's going to follow India in terms of using sugarcane to produce ethanol, as in ethanol, the sort of conventional ethanol for vehicles. SAF could be a different factor, but I think we'll come on to talk about that separately. In terms of the corn-based ethanol impact, I think this is really important because, as you mentioned, you've got a huge expansion of corn-based ethanol in Brazil, and we're seeing a similar trend also in India. So if we look just over the last year, cane-based ethanol was limited by the government because they were worried about domestic sugar supply. So they limited the diversion of sugar to ethanol to 2 million tons, which was lower than the year before. But despite that, the ethanol blend carried on growing. And it did that because corn-based ethanol expanded hugely. So over the last year, corn-based ethanol has accounted for more than half of the ethanol that's been produced in India. So much so that India has now become a net importer of corn, which I'm not sure whether that really makes sense long term. I think they'll have to start growing more corn if that trend is going to continue. But nonetheless, it's an important change because initially the ethanol program in India was just about diverting the sugar surplus away from world market exports towards domestic ethanol. That is now a bit more complicated. It's not just about sugar anymore. It's also about corn.
Yeah, this is very important. What Gareth is saying is very important, people, because he's talking about limits. As we know, India is growing, expanding population, per capita income. So we could think about they will have a lot of things to do, thinking about protein, other things, not only sugar. But the point is and it's important, Gareth, because right now, this crop, 24-25 in the South, and looking for cane and corn for ethanol, we have 1/3 of the ethanol produced from corn. So it's something, it's a big change, important change that we are seeing here. Well, but in the short term, Gareth, we'll see the first and part of the second quarter of 2025 with sugar deficit. This is your report and your analysis. Is any significant recovery in sugar prices expected based on it? Could this happen before March 25? This is an important question for the guys that are waiting for a better reais per kilogram of ATR.
Well, we've already seen the market react to this idea that Brazil will produce 39.5 million tons of sugar. In the last part of September, prices shot up to current levels around 22 cents or so. And yeah, I think in order for it to go higher, the market needs to see some confirmation. If we get confirmation that the sugar production in Brazil is going to be 39, or even if it was below 39, then you would expect to see more support, because there's still some uncertainty there. There's an expectation will fall in the 39.5 range, but confirmation of that would would probably provide additional support because, as I say, the market's facing a deficit, which is we think is maybe 1.5 million tons for raw sugar. So it's not huge, but at the same time, it's not easy to identify which importers will pare back their demand in order to bring the market into sufficiently into balance. The low white premium will help to do that for sure, and the inverted market structure will also help to do that. But if we get some confirmation of the low end Brazil production numbers, then maybe we can see some support in the short term. There's also speculation, a lot of discussion during Sugar Week in London last week that we could see there could be some sort of squeeze on the March contract, because if Brazil doesn't have a lot of deliverable supply against that contract, then it could become quite technical in terms of different players looking to squeeze that contract. So that's all things that we can look out for over the next few months.
Oh, thank you. This is important because it's true that we will see the last third of the crop, Gareth, here. We will see a very interesting thing. It's so complicated, the quality of the cane and what's going on, is that we will see not a crop that will finish at the end of October, as many said before, but probably will go up to December, but slowly. So many people will be waiting for what's going on. Brazil, no. We'll have the same amount of cane, but slowly will because of the quality of the cane here. Well, talking about the area that's very important in terms of supply, the monsoons were good on the eastern sugar side. Do you expect a sugar deficit or surplus for the global 25-26 crop, or it's too early to access these, even with variables to occur?
Well, it is early. A lot of the 25-26 cane and beet in the northern hemisphere isn't planted yet. It will be planted over the next 6 months. Thailand will plant in Q4, India also in Q4, and then Europe and other parts of India in Q1. But I think what we can say is that sugar prices have rallied just before those plantings take place. So that has made sugar crops look attractive relative to alternatives, and should encourage farmers in the northern hemisphere to plant more. So we expect area to recover in India because of improved water availability, actually, rather than alternative crops. We also expect an increase in area in Thailand because sugar prices being higher means that its cane is more competitive than cassava. So that will be supportive for production in 25-26. But we don't think that area will expand everywhere. In Europe, we think for different reasons area will actually fall because basically because of much lower sugar prices in Europe currently, mean that processors are offering lower beet prices for 25-26 and also reducing the area, the tonnage rather, that they contract for next year. So it's not a universal story that everyone will expand, but fundamentally the sugar being attractive compared to alternative crops will mean the area will increase. If we assume normal weather, which is a dangerous thing to do these days, it seems, but we have to assume normal weather, then yes, we could have a surplus, but not necessarily a huge surplus, and one that would only really be in surplus with Brazil maximizing sugar.
This is very important, Gareth, what you're saying, because the world will need this new amount of sugar from other countries, because as we will discuss today, we believe that Brazil will have difficulties to maintain the certain 90 million tons of sugar next crop. So, talking about demand and sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, as we know, the problem always that's the problem when you are building a new product is the production cost. It's much more than what we have for aviation fuel, normal aviation fuel. The point is, when you look for the demand and when we look for the targets people are putting up to 2030, we are seeing a growth in the curve. but there are other routes under development and transatlantic flight tests carried out with good results. Mm-hmm. What are the barriers, in your point, to the product besides the higher renewable fuel production costs?
Yeah, SAF is a really interesting one because it's has potentially a huge opportunity for the Brazilian cane sector, but there's also a huge amount of uncertainty as well. I think the first thing to say that if we take that the relatively short period out to 2030, over the next 5 years, most of the new capacity that will come on stream for SAF is going to be heifer based on waste oils. That's the more proven technology. It's also already being used on a commercial scale, and so most of the capacity will come from that source. But it's also clear that there's only so much waste oil that's available, right? It's limited in terms of supply, and that it's also used in the production of biodiesel. So that creates a gap that could be filled by other sources, and alcohol to jet is one of those, which obviously uses ethanol as the feedstock. Now, you won't be able to sell that alcohol to jet based ethanol in all markets. Like Europe will only accept SAF from that's based on waste products. But there are big opportunities in other countries like the US and Japan to do that. The big issue, I think, for alcohol to jet is to prove that the technology works on a commercial scale. That hasn't actually been demonstrated yet. So that's one barrier that needs to be overcome. But if that can be proven, then there's a huge additional market out there for Brazilian ethanol or potential market, I should say, because we're only talking about potential at this point rather than reality. But it's a big opportunity. The question is, are Brazilian millers going to get huge premiums for this ethanol? That isn't clear either. But even if the premiums are modest, it creates a bigger market. It would tighten the domestic ethanol supply, help to absorb some of this corn-based ethanol, which is coming on stream so quickly, and help support ethanol prices at home at the minimum. So in that sense, it could be a really important development.
This is very important because at the same time, I was in Germany in a German-Brazil agriculture initiative we have for many years, some weeks ago. And then I listened from the Latin American president of Volkswagen, because the meeting was in Wolfsburg, the land of Volkswagen. And what he said that they are talking a lot with the guys from Colombia, looking for something near what is going in Brazil with flexible fuel hybrid Volkswagen cars in Colombia in a scale. We are talking about the reaction or reality of the tropical world for things like that are certainly faster than what we can or what we could see in the North Hemisphere countries. But do you believe that with the bioeconomy, with all the huge discussion, but at the same time with something that we could define as a complex climate reality in terms of actions? So you look for 2023 and see the year where we saw the consumption of oil extremely high, and the speech is for renewables, but the reality is the same. Mm-hmm. What I would like to finish our conversation with your point of view, because I really believe this is important. What do you believe? You think all the things are positive or could be reality in up to 2030 for ethanol?
I mean, in terms of vehicle, the development of the vehicle fleet globally, we're going to see different countries following different pathways, right? In Europe and China, electrification is the pathway which seems most likely, although it's not developing in Europe as quickly as was initially expected. But we at Global Data, we have a team, another division, which is just looking at the automotive sector, and their forecasts are that if we take a country like Brazil, that the electrification of the vehicle fleet will start to happen, but even by 2040, it's still a really small part of the overall vehicle fleet. It will be predominantly a fleet which will be using or has the potential to use ethanol if it's available. And obviously, the fuel efficiency of the vehicles will improve with sort of hybrid flex fuel technology increasingly being used, and but at the same time, the size of the vehicle fleet is also growing. So I believe in that time frame, just out to 2030, then there's a huge potential still for ethanol. My understanding is that most of the cars in Brazil are flex fuel, but actually only a relatively small proportion are using ethanol still. So the growth potential there is still very large.
Gente, o Gareth é estudioso, está absolutamente em dia com o que está acontecendo no mundo, vocês viram, tem uma visão muito positiva, muito clara sobre o Brasil, e essa entrevista é para abrir os olhos de todos para o que está acontecendo no mundo em relação a isso, aos combustíveis renováveis e à bioeconomia. So Gareth, thank you for your analysis, and it's an honor for us to have you with us.
No, my pleasure. Thanks very much.